only a regiment with the broken status can perform a rally action. If the regiment performs a rally action, it is no longer broken. Remove the broken marker.
So in this case, my Steel Legion are broken. This is just the token I use for them being broken. But in order to take a rally action, it's pretty simple. They just use one of their actions, take a rally action, and they go unbroken. Simple as that. Next, we're going to talk about the reform action. So I have a pretty simple scenario here that the Steel Legion want to expand out to have 4 in the front rank instead of 2 in the front rank like they are now. And so they're just going to take a quick reform action to do that. So then you would just move these guys from where they are out. And based on the rules, they didn't move farther than their move characteristic of 5. And the center of the regiment stayed the same. Okay? Now if they want to take another reform action and just to change direction, they could do that too. But part of this first reform action is you can actually face it in any direction you want. So you could actually change it and face that direction. Let's just say you were coming at the battlefield and the enemy regiment came onto the battlefield on the side from reinforcements and kind of tried to surprise you, so you have to reform, and you reform to have more stands in the front rank in order to do a nice charge and start doing melee, Alright, so here you have another scenario where you have 6 stands here. Now the tricky part is when you reform, you have to make sure that the center of the regiment, which is going to be right here, has to stay the center of the regiment once it reforms. So we're going to pull these guys out and they're going to move up front. These guys are going to go forward. So now this is still my center, so I'll have to move them back a little bit, and now I can do this rotation of any direction that I want, as long as I'm keeping that little point the same, in the same spot. Now we're on to advice for the rally and the reform action. If your regiment loses half of its stands, it ends up being broken. And then if they are halved again, they get shattered. And if they're shattered, you completely lose them. Now this is only really consequential if it's a big unit. A lot of times I'm getting my unit shattered when there's 1 stand left in the regiment, which is really not going to be a big deal. This only really matters in really big units. Let's just say you have 6 stands in your regiment. They break your regiment for some way, like using some magic or a spell or something like that. And then they go ahead and charge you and kill 3 of your stands. Now at this point they're shattered, they're gone. You've lost 3 stands just because they are a broken unit that was shattered. So doing a rally action is kind of important if you can fit it in there to make sure that you don't lose the regiment, a big regiment. On to the reform. Reform is something that I love doing, especially when you have a unit like the Fenrir Ward Beasts. They have fluid formation, so they can reform either before they move or after they move. And so it's a really easy way to get between regiments, get between terrain, get into little areas. The best part about that free reform is that the angle that you can choose to go. Because sometimes you want to move over this way and then turn this way, but you didn't have enough movement, and so that free reform is just amazing. But I use reforms to really get in between regiments. I use reforms to get around terrain. It just helps maneuver. I also use them just to face different directions. So let's say I have a regiment of Steel Legion or something like that, and they're headed this way, and they're headed towards, let's just say they're headed towards some bone golems, and those bone golems die for some other reason, and now there's another bigger threat over here, like let's say the Fallen Divinities over here. I want to send my Steel Legion over there, so I'll reform them, turn them in a different direction, and now I can charge maybe the Fallen Divinity or something. So I really love using the reform action, and I use it as often as possible. Coming up soon, there's going to be the reform action in the combat reform, which is something I use even more, and I am surprised that other people don't use it as often, and I'll show you why in that video. But the reform action is just, I think it's an important tool for helping maneuver your regiments into place and then be able to get them into certain areas. And also maybe it's a reform action can get you out of line of sight or the a barrage range of a different enemy regiment. Reform, close up your ranks, And then that way now you're kind of sliding past that range of, let me say, crossbowmen or something like that. Or who knows? Just a vol unit. All right, thank you for joining me for this episode of the Resinator's Conquest podcast. Next week is a raw. Oh, shoot. Nah, this week is the raw because I'm a little late. And then next week is going to be another Conquest podcast. That episode, I'm not sure what it's going to be, but it'll be next week. All right, thanks.